The Surprising Adventures of Baron Munchausen with Willy Rushton and Toby Longworth. Episode 8, Home Beloved Eagles.
Imagine...
Wheels! Hundreds of them! And they're coming this way!
Imagine...
We are back in the library at Bodenwiede, where Baron Munchausen is revealing the astonishing events that took place while he was sailing the South Seas on a Dutch ship.
Imagine, if you will, a mighty sea creature the size of the Rock of Gibraltar. Now, imagine that this is but one of a fleet of whales, all of similar size, advancing towards your ship. That, precisely, was now our position. Keep calm, I said to the captain, over cries of panic and fear from his lily-livered crew.
Calm? We're lost at sea without a compass, surrounded by whales the size of Amsterdam, and you want me to keep...
The first whale was upon us, and had sucked the entire ship into its mouth. There was a rushing of water as we passed between two of its teeth, each one of which was taller than our mainsail. We held on for our lives, as the churning waters all around us began to calm. We were in a large cave, with a wall of teeth behind and a mighty tonsil, as high as a hillock ahead of us. How very interesting, I commented. We appear to be in the mouth of a whale.
Interesting? Is that all you can... No!
The whale had swallowed us, plunging our ship down its throat until it came to rest in a great, dark, evil-smelling sea. After we had lain becalmed for some time, the crew lit torches. Now all around us we could see the remains of other ships. Broken masts, anchors, ropes, empty lifeboats. So, we are not the whale's first victims, I said grimly. The question is, where are our fellow survivors? We were to discover the answer to this question at low tide, which occurred quite suddenly when we were taking supper.
Surely, Baron, low tide in a whale's stomach?
Precisely. When our host took his daily drink, a huge quantity of water, approximately the contents of Lake Geneva, I estimated, cascaded over our heads, soaking us to the skin. Then, later in the day, the whale would give a mighty sigh, and the level would drop quite suddenly.
Low tide.
Exactly. This was a fish of regular habits. On our second day, I ventured on to land with the captain and a party of sailors with torches. There we made the discovery that I had anticipated all along. We were not alone. In the main part of the whale's stomach, 10,000 people. Men, women, and children of all nationalities were this very day gathering for a great conference to decide how to escape. Some of those present, I was told, had been living here for years. Marriages had taken place. For some of the younger children, life in the dark and smelly inside of a whale was all they knew. Unfortunately, it took so long for the meeting to gather that just as the chairman was calling it to order, the accursed whale took its daily drink. Forcing us all to scramble for our lives to our boats. The next day we met again, and I was unanimously voted chairman. I brought the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, here is what we should do to escape from this noisome dungeon of the deep. I went on to describe my plan. 2 mainsails should be spliced together, and the next time the whale opened his mouth, the mast should be wedged in perpendicularly, preventing him from closing his jaws. We should then sail to freedom. The plan...
Baron! Very well. Oh, he's a jolly good fellow.
met with general approval. At the next low tide, I organised 100 of our strongest men to splice the 2 masts together and to carry the construction upwards, which they did with some difficulty, through several hurricanes caused by the whale's coughing fits, into the whale's mouth. Hardly had we arrived in that great cavern than when, with a mighty snort like a clap of thunder, the whale opened his mouth wide and yawned. It was the worst timed yawn of his life. My men forced the masts between the roof of his mouth and his tongue. With a bellow of rage, the whale discovered that his jaws were open.
Oh, bravo, Baron!
Triumphantly, we hurried back to the stomach, where our fellow prisoners were waiting in their boats. To the sound of hearty cheers from the men and even some grateful weeping from the women, I led our fleet of 95 vessels to freedom. Moments after the last ship had sailed through the whale's gaping jaws, there was a great crack as he finally shattered the masts. He looked at us, perhaps considering whether to swallow us once again, but with a final bellow, as if to say, "I give you best, Baron Munchausen," he swam off at high speed. As his crew were congratulating and thanking me, the Dutch captain turned to me.
But where are we now, Baron?
I looked through my telescope, referred briefly to my compass, and informed the Dutchman that we were in the Caspian.
The Caspian? How on earth
The Baron omits to explain how, having emerged from the whale's stomach, he came to be in possession of both a telescope and
Precisely the nitpicking point they all make.
Oh? How do you mean, Baron?
The dry-as-dust armchair adventurers who live life at second hand by poring over my famous travels. You're just like that American fellow Bogle.
Dr. Bogle? You've met my great rival Bogle?
He was here only last week asking the same damn fool questions as you've been. How did you do this? How do you account for that? What was your very greatest adventure?
I like to think that as the official keeper of the Munchausen archive, my questions have been a shade more sophisticated. I mean, asking a man who has driven a carriage drawn by a wolf through St. Petersburg, been scalped by American Indians, visited the moon twice, and has dallied with Catherine the Great and the goddess Venus, who has been swallowed by at least 2 giants of the deep, asking that man of his greatest adventure was perhaps a little naive, even for an inmate of the University of Wisconsin. What was it, Baron?
My greatest adventure occurred but a few weeks ago and took place in one of the most enchanting and exciting towns I've ever had the good fortune to visit. Margate, England. It happened that I was visiting friends on the Isle of Thanet, and on this particular occasion was taking a walk through the delightful streets of Margate. Just outside the town, I noticed an old castle standing stark and dignified on a nearby hill. I wandered among the ruins, marvelling at their beauty, saddened by their desolation, meditating upon life, death, change, decay, and the meaning of truth, when I noticed an old turret, almost concealed by ivy, which stood high above the castle. With some difficulty I climbed to the top, where I was surprised to find a dark hole at its centre, almost like a gateway. What could it be? A well? An unexplored cavern that led into the hill? How deep was it? Out of simple curiosity, I took a stone and with one leg on each side of the hole, dropped it in. Within seconds, there was a great rustling below, and before I could move, I found myself being lifted upwards into the sky. I had disturbed the nest of a giant eagle. Thinking quickly, I held onto its neck. As we rose over Margate, I managed to settle comfortably on its neck and even began to enjoy the view. The eagle flew at astonishing speed, and it seemed within minutes we were crossing the channel as easily as if it were the River Thames. Over the forest of Compiègne, we were joined by another giant eagle, an event which I soon discovered was exceedingly fortunate. For seeing that my mount was towering under my weight, the second eagle cleverly flew in front of it, supporting the first eagle's head on its tail. Being a traveller of the world, I have a good knowledge of geography. Yet we were now so high that somewhere south of Gibraltar I lost all sense of where we were flying. I was just considering how to escape from this situation. I'm as brave as the next man, but if I'm going to travel by eagle, I like at least to know where I'm going, when something quite extraordinary happened. We were suddenly surrounded by thousands of tiny, squealing, foul-looking creatures, each one of which was carrying a 3-pronged fork the size of a needle. The eagle screamed with rage and panic. I cursed and bellowed, yet the ghastly chattering spirits tormented us with their screams and forks for over 10 minutes. At the very moment I thought that I would go mad at the noise and pain, I heard the sound of sweet, heavenly music. The creatures backed away from us in alarm, as a huge army of tiny angels advanced upon them, and like dogs corralling sheep into a pen, forced the devils into a black box. Just then, a a great hand reached down from the clouds and hurled the box into infinity with these words,
Begone, thou devils, and persecute mankind no more.
It wasn't the same voice that had thanked you from the heavens after you had saved the life of the old man on your way to Russia.
I rather believe it was. Yet it is not for me to say how much of my good fortune has been the direct result of protection from, shall we say, the heavens. At the end of the day, my eagles landed on a distant mountain, which according to my estimation was somewhere beyond the continent of America. Wearily I prepared to dismount, but such was the howling and roaring of wild beasts all around us that I decided to spend the night stretched out on the back of my eagle, who would surely fly away if we were attacked. When the sun rose the next day, there was no sign of hostile wildlife, but I was faced with a further problem. Both eagles were lying flat on a rock, snoring as loudly as drunkards in a tavern. I quickly discovered what had happened while I'd been sleeping. During the night, the eagles had been eating a strange, dark fruit about the size of a cabbage that was hanging from trees nearby. Cutting open one of them with my hunting knife, I found to my astonishment that it was made of the best roast beef, pink on the inside and crusty on the outside. Reaching for some bread, which I had saved since our departure from Margate, I enjoyed the most delicious breakfast I've ever tasted. I was still puzzled as to why my eagles appeared to be in a drunken stupor. Distracted, I happened to pick up a nearby berry, and without thinking, put it in my mouth. The clear juice it contained brought a smile to my lips and joy to my palate. Here was the explanation for why the eagles were sleeping so soundly. The liquid was pure gin of the highest quality. Within moments I felt refreshed. Having consumed several clusters of berries, I detached my belt, attached it to enough cold beef fruit and gin berries for our journey, and tied it around the second eagle's neck. I was now in excellent spirits and singing some of my favourite tavern songs. Possibly it was the sound of my voice which aroused the eagles, for they quickly took wing once more. We flew north, reaching the polar region by sundown. Although it was deuced cold, I managed to keep warm by tucking my limbs under my mount's feathers, occasionally taking a nip of berry gin. It was on the following day that disaster struck. You'll know that one of the greatest hazards in the Arctic is the frozen cloud, an invisible and unbreakable sheet of ice which can sometimes extend for miles across the wintry sky. Ah! With a sickening crack, both eagles hit one of these terrifying objects, losing consciousness instantly, and if it had not been for my quick thinking, all three of us would have been killed by our fall. My solution to our problem was ingenious. Lying across the first eagle's back, I held its wings open, while at the same time I supported the second eagle with my feet. It was tiring work, but effective. We landed unharmed. My troubles were not yet over. All around me, the waves, the wind, the ice, the roaring of lions.
Lions, Baron? In the Arctic?
That is the roaring of, vicious sea lions. I consumed a few more gin berries and just about managed to squeeze some drops into the eyes of my eagles, who were still groggy from their fall. Tenderly, I placed my arms around each of their necks and sang them a gentle lullaby from northern Bavaria.
Baron.
Enough of these adventures, this howling wind, these hostile polar wastes, these roaring sea lions, I cried suddenly. Home, my beloved, my faithful eagles! You may have heard of homing pigeons, but did you ever hear of homing eagles? No, I thought not. As if it were the most natural thing in the world, my eagles rose as one, with me on their backs, wheeled south towards Europe. Within a matter of few hours, I sighted the coast of Britain, and then some familiar towns, Edinburgh, Newcastle, York, Nottingham, Cambridge, London, and miracle of miracles, my beloved Margate. Wearily the two eagles flew back to the turret on the ruined castle, where, after a tender farewell, they disappeared into their nest, leaving me to make my way back to home and safety.
An astonishing adventure, Baron. And what happened to the eagles?
Did I say safety? As I was making my way down a hill which overlooks Margate, I placed my hand upon a large hedgehog that was lying there.
We could spend all night listening to the surprising adventures of Baron Munchausen, for this astonishing adventurer, this 18th century hero, has already given the lie to those pedants who claimed that he was no more than...
And then, an octopus. A giant octopus.
Yes, no more than a fantasist, a weaver of tall tales. We have presented the evidence. It is for you to decide whether the Baron was a man of action or of imagination. From the Baron's library at Bodenwede, from Baron Munchausen himself. Good night.
The Surprising Adventures of Baron Munchausen featured Willy Rushton as the Baron. The editor and all other parts were played by Toby Longworth. The stories were adapted by Terence Blacker and produced by Diane Mathias.